Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited for this upcoming discussion on joyful literacy, and we just welcome you and thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. Before we do, I have a couple of kind of housekeeping notes for all of us to make sure our webinar goes smoothly and everyone gets to participate in the conversation. So we are using a chat feature today. So if you have anything that you'd like to share in the chat, questions that you might have, anything you want to ask or anything you want to share, please do so in the chat. If we have questions that come through during the content part of the presentation, we will make note of those notes and we will address those questions either at the end of the webinar or potentially throughout if we can get to them. If we do not get to your question today in the webinar specifically, we will have a Q&A document that we will provide later after the webinar concludes, and we will share questions and answers at that point. We also do have a survey that we would love to encourage all of you to fill out at the end of the survey or end of the webinar. Your feedback is very important to us, so please take a moment to fill out that survey, and you'll get the link at the end of the webinar. There is a closed captions feature. If you are needing the closed captions, you can select that in the Zoom platform. So help yourself to do that if that would be helpful to you. Right after the webinar concludes, you will get an email from us that has all of the slides that are presented today, as well as the links to handouts that we're referencing and things like that. So again, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will begin with our official content. So I'd love to introduce you to our panelists and our Joyful Literacy team. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Pam Spieser. She's a Senior Research Associate at REL West. Julie Montali, who's the Executive Director of Early Learning at the Sacramento County Office of Education. Stephen Hicks, who's the Early Learning Coordinator for the Sacramento County of Education. And then Kim Austin is a Senior Program Associate at REL West, who's also on the Joyful Literacy team. Just to give you a little bit of background about REL West specifically, REL West is one of the 10 regional educational laboratories throughout the country, and it's our intent and our goal to bridge research and evidence-based practice together so that folks can elevate their classroom practice and make sure that evidence is being used throughout the classroom to improve student outcomes. So we are very proud of our work, and we're very grateful for our partners at SCOE who have helped us to really understand how to infuse evidence-based learning throughout their literacy work in their county. So with no further ado, I would love to hand this off to Pam Spieser, who will take over from here and begin with our content today. Pam?
Thank you, Rebecca. Unmute myself. That would be a good thing to start with. And a big thanks to all of you for being here today. We know that you have a lot of competing priorities, and we also know that some of you are joining us from the East Coast, and this is probably butting up against your dinner time. So we are just delighted and feel super honored that you chose to spend this time with us. I was looking at the registration list this morning, and I was so excited to see so many different places represented, places across the country, county offices, home care, librarians, so many different places and roles. And so super excited to have you as part of this growing community. And we hope that you will continue to join us as we continue on our Joyful Literacy journey. So our goals today are really for you to walk away from today's webinar with an understanding of how the Joyful Literacy Planning Guide, which is short for the Joyful Reading and Creative Expression with Young Children Planning Guide. You'll hear me calling it the Joyful Literacy Planning Guide because it's shorter. But we really want to for you to walk away with an understanding about how it can support you in your efforts to provide or support culturally and linguistically sustaining and evidence-based literacy instruction to bring more joy and creativity into literacy education and to strengthen family engagement. We also hope that you'll take away some ideas for how you might implement the planning guide in your particular context in ways that are adapted to the way you need to use it. It's not a prescriptive thing. We want you to feel that you have the power to adapt it to what works for you. And we'd also like for you to get a sense of the bigger project, the bigger Joyful Literacy project that REL West and SCOE are partnering on. And we have some exciting news at the end of the webinar to share with you about our Joyful Literacy Playbook. So please stay to the end and you'll get some really cool party favors. So as for the agenda, first, because the main focus of today's webinar is the Joyful Reading and Creative Expression with Young Children Planning Guide or the Joyful Literacy Planning Guide, I'll provide a brief tour of it. I'll be your tour guide so that you can see what's inside of it and what's available to you. Next, Julie Montali will share about how the Sacramento County Office of Education has been leading Joyful Literacy efforts across the county. And she'll also share about plans to expand Joyful Literacy continue to expand across the county, but also across the state of California, because we're in California. After that, Stephen will be sharing about how the Sacramento County Office of Education team has been using the planning guide to strengthen early literacy partnerships with families. And then I'll be back to share about some hot off the press resources that will help you implement the Joyful Literacy Planning Guide. And finally, Rebecca will ask you to complete a brief survey. And we really hope that you will stay to the end to complete that survey because it helps us in our work. But first, before we launch into that, it is my great pleasure to introduce a very special guest. Sarah Neville Morgan is Deputy Superintendent of the Opportunities for All branch at the California Department of Education and a longtime champion of high quality care and learning for young children, as well as strong partnerships with families and communities and meaningful support for educators, caregivers, and leaders. So thank you so much for being with us today, Sarah. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Pam. I appreciate the warm welcome. I want to start off by acknowledging we stand on the lands of Indigenous nations whose children have also faced incredible injustice and harm across our nation and states past. So with an opening of a land acknowledgement, it's just a way of honoring the original occupants of this land and thinking about each of our states' history and the devastating effects of the missions, the gold rush when you're in places like California, colonization, and the introduction of disease. It is important to recognize the land's first people. By learning the cultures and histories of Indigenous peoples, we honor those histories and counter the narratives of discovery and colonial power, really doing a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present Indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. Through a land acknowledgement, we demonstrate a commitment to the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of colonialism. With this, I would like to pay my respects to tribal elders, past, present, and emerging, and recognize and celebrate the diversity of Native people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters, not just of California where I am, but of our nation. As we gather for this meeting, both physically dispersed and visually connected, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our businesses today. For the California Department of Education, this land was and still is the tribal land of the Nisenan people. Sacramento was a gathering place for many local tribes who have lived throughout the Central Valley and the foothills around Sacramento for generations and were the original stewards for the land. So as we think through acknowledgements and thanking, I need to make sure that I thank Judy Delgado from the California Department of Ed and the Sacramento's Racial Equity Ad Hoc Committee, who have crafted a previous land acknowledgement for the CDE that we continue to build on. And since we're talking about joyful literacy today, I also want to shed light on the importance of tribal language preservation and how the oppression of the original occupants of this land also contributed to the perish of so many tribal languages. And when we talk about our commitment to joyful literacy today, we also need to commit to supporting children from tribal communities and from all over to learn and engage with their community's native languages. So as we think of newcomers coming in now and children whose families speak a language other than English at home, really lifting up and celebrating language as part of this. Going back to the tribal acknowledgement, it's important not to just acknowledge, but to move to action. So my ask for each of you joining today is to think of an important step your agency can take related to language restoration and preservation and the potential for increased joy created by enhanced affirmation and belonging. In the California Department of Education's Opportunities for All branch, we've been doing a lot in the space of joyful literacy. We know how important joyful literacy is for our littles who are just starting to form a love for reading and storytelling and are beginning to engage more meaningfully with language and pre-literacy skills. While literacy should be joyful for all ages, a commitment to nurturing the whole child through the integration of culturally affirming practices in children's language and literacy development is really critical for our young children. We know preschool is a pivotal period in growing language skills, whether verbal, nonverbal, or in a language other than English. And how critical it is to foster the building blocks for literacy skills so that all children are supported on their journey of learning to read and can continue to strengthen these skills as they transition to kindergarten and beyond. This summer, we will be releasing California's Preschool Transitional Kindergarten Learning Foundations, or PTKLF, which include a significant revision in our language and literacy domain to reflect the recent research on the science of learning and development and increased alignment with the kindergarten standards in California, so that children experience a more seamless transition in their learning of language and literacy skills. In this revision, we also have an emphasis on equity and ensuring all children can engage in meaningful language and literacy learning to grow their skills and knowledge. Throughout the foundations, we have several examples of children with disabilities, multilingual learners, and children from different cultures and races, so that all California's young children, all of our nation's children, are represented in this resource. Examples also reveal the importance of whole child development and how children do not solely learn language and literacy in a silo or dedicated literacy instruction block, which are important but not enough. They're also strengthening their skills during play and everyday interactions. Similar to this new CDE publication, we are also working on a preschool to third grade, or P-3 learning progression. This resource is in several domains, one of which is language and literacy. I have to shout out to Pam, who's one of our WestEd partners in helping create this, along with Peter Mangioni's team at WestEd. The goal of this resource is to demonstrate the alignment between the new PTKLF and the K3 standards and provide developmentally appropriate, playful examples across the P3 continuum. We know this commitment to coherence across the early grades is important for language and literacy because of how critical scope and sequence is for this learning domain, which aligns with the science of language and literacy development. And again, demonstrating how language and literacy does not develop in a silo, and learning can be enhanced through this integrating meaningful content areas and curriculum themes connected to children's culture, home language, and ability. In OFAB, we also have a commitment to joyful learning overall, and that teaching should be joyful for our educators. Fostering this joy can help with teacher retention and affirms the important role that educators play in children's learning. Another resource that I'm going to highlight briefly is our UPK curriculum guidance document, which discusses elements to consider when choosing a UPK curriculum, including specific attention to language and literacy, and how to use storytelling, story acting, informational text, peer discussions, play, hands-on activities, and project-based approaches to foster joy in learning. As part of our CDE P3 webinar series, we also curated topics focused on playful learning and emphasizing the importance of fostering both joy and a sense of belonging in classroom communities. And there, for anyone interested, is our QR code if you want to check out our UPK curriculum guidance. And within all of this, we always have that deep focus on multilingualism, which is central to language and literacy for California's children and for so many other states. As many of you know, we have in California the California English Learner Roadmap Policy, which was adopted by our State Board of Education in 2017 and sets forth a vision for multilingual learning in our state, the foundation of which is built in the early years. This vision calls for multilingual learners to be supported to fully and meaningfully access and participate in a 21st century education from early childhood through grade 12 that results in their attaining high levels of English proficiency, mastery of grade level standards, and opportunities to develop proficiency in multiple languages. Within joyful literacy, we also know how important it is to foster joy and belonging for children with disabilities, and how universal design for learning is critical in ensuring all children can participate and engage with literacy. Overall, across the CDE Opportunities for All branch, we work to exemplify the partnerships necessary to inspire inclusive, affirming, and joyful multilingual, multicultural educational experiences for P3 and beyond, going both back to our babies where we know it's important, and then all the way through. Through this collaboration among early education, special education, multilingual education, and wraparound services such as expanded learning after school as a strong foundation for learning and development for our diverse population of children and students. So my part will close off today and move into the real meat of it all by saying that when we hear joyful literacy, we envision opportunities for California's children to develop biliteracy and even multiliteracy that preserves and builds upon languages used by our families, as well as uplifts the cultural assets children bring to their learning and further development of language and literacy skills, ensuring that our children, our students, are prepared for a cross-world community where they really can gain global skills. All right, Pam, I'm ready to hand it back over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate it. It is so amazing to hear about all the wonderful things the California Department of Education is doing for our young children. And I'm hoping that for those of you in other states, that was resonating with things you're doing and perhaps inspiring you to kind of check out what California is doing and compare, get ideas, share ideas. That's always a beautiful thing. And I also wanted to mention how grateful we are to have you as an advisory partner. I'm sure you all heard how wonderful Sarah is and the things that she is, the initiative she's leading at the state level. It's pretty incredible. So now I'm going to give you a brief tour of the Joyful Literacy Planning Guide. I'm not going to be going into depth on everything or perhaps on anything, because what my goal really is to provide you with sort of a broad overview of what's available to you in the planning guide, and hopefully to entice you to dive into the planning guide after the webinar. So just as in broad strokes, the planning guide focuses on joyful and evidence-based language and literacy learning for children in preschool through first grade. Though we have been working with schools and districts where they've opted to expand or extend the joyful literacy work through the elementary grades and even up through middle school. So it's not necessarily restricted. Joyful literacy is not exclusively for early learning, but that's what the planning guide really focuses on. So I want to encourage you, if you're in like a P8, P12 setting, please think about adapting the ideas for older children. The planning guide offers some very concrete and practical tips, tools, and resources for implementing really a week-long sequence of activities centered on culturally affirming storybooks. And that's what I'm going to be explaining now. Before jumping into the planning guide, however, as Sarah was mentioning, it's really important to acknowledge and make transparent the place we're working from. And I want to emphasize that in joyful literacy, we very intentionally prioritize love and joy in our work with both children and adults alike. Learning should not be silent or still, obedient, but rather boisterous, dynamic, and joyful. And that is a big part of this endeavor. Furthermore, offering young children, and in particular children of color and children with immigrant backgrounds, intellectually rich and creative learning experience that are responsive to their multi-layered identities and where they can exercise their agency, that should be normal. That should be normalized and not an act of resistance. So we firmly believe this, and in all our work, we are collaborating with educators to make sure this happens. And I should say that this type of joyful, robust, and affirming learning is completely compatible with evidence-based practices. It actually creates the conditions for evidence-based practices to be successful. And that's why we're so firmly committed to it. And this is a working definition of joyful literacy, which you'll see really matches these core beliefs. So I invite you to read along and notice anything that resonates with you, and feel free to jot it down or type into the chat anything that's resonating with you if you want to. So joyful literacy promotes evidence-based and comprehensive early literacy instruction through a culturally sustaining whole child lens. And it fosters family engagement, creativity, and social emotional learning in young children's literacy development. So we believe that it's important to integrate these areas with literacy. And research shows children who engage in joyful literacy types of activities, they feel really seen and safe and supported and confident and connected to literacy activities and in literacy activities. And they feel positive about literacy and joyful. So this is our mission, this is our vision. And as we continue to develop the joyful literacy work, as I mentioned earlier, all of these beliefs and these ideas and these ideals are completely compatible with the research base on language and literacy development. And we draw heavily from 6 Institute of Education Sciences What Works Clearinghouse practice guides, which really synthesize the research into guidance recommendations for what people should be doing in their learning environments. And we also, because we're in California, we draw heavily from California's English Language Arts, English Language Development Framework, which is completely aligned with these practice guides, and also with research on cultural and linguistically sustaining practices and English language development. So we want to make sure that folks understand what our research base is and where we're getting our guidance. So that's a lot. Those are very big practice guides, and the ELA-LD framework is, I think, over 1,000 pages long. And so we don't expect everybody to memorize all those things at once. And we really wanted to make this extensive body of research guidance as readily accessible and actionable as possible. So we synthesized it into 6 tenets that we grouped into 3 focus areas. And the first focus area is higher order literacy. And that has 3 tenets. The first tenet is to engage children in interactive read-alouds using identity-affirming storybooks. So this involves choosing complex texts that are rich in language and ideas, and that really affirm children's experiences and identities. The second tenet is to teach language explicitly and build children's language awareness. Even our young children are able to understand things about how language works, and empowered with this knowledge, they can do amazing things with language. And then the third tenet in that focus area is to model the writing process and provide daily time to write. Children really need daily time to express themselves through writing, whether it's emergent writing or writing where they are applying their foundational skills. And we really need to be modeling what writers do as we write. So thinking aloud, modeling editing and revising, etc. And the second focus area is to teach foundational skills. And this is foundational literacy. So the research is very clear that foundational skills need to be taught explicitly, systematically, in a structured way, and that foundational skills instruction should be differentiated based on assessment so that children are really receiving the targeted instruction they really need. Our third focus area is to establish caring, playful, and engaged literacy community. And that is really critical. As I mentioned earlier, that's really laying the foundation for all of these other evidence-based literacy practice to occur. So we really want to promote playful learning, which we know is effective. We want to provide frequent opportunities for children to collaborate with one another on literacy activities and make choices to exercise their agency. And we really also, as Sarah mentioned, want to establish caring classrooms where everybody feels included and where they're developing their social emotional skills. So those are the tenets. Just wanted to briefly let you know about those. And the fourth tenet, we're not going to be talking about too much today because the planning guide is really focused on the other 5 tenets. But I wanted to let you know that foundational skills instruction is a big part of joyful literacy. And you should have a link to a paper that we use in professional learning that focuses specifically on foundational skills. Okay, so after all of that, let's jump into the planning guide. So as I mentioned earlier, the planning guide focuses on those other 5 tenets: higher order literacy, establishing a sense of belonging, making sure there's playful learning and kindness and mindfulness and creativity happening in an integrated way with literacy. So the link to the planning guide should be in the chat now, so feel free to take a look at it, download it. If you're able to multitask, you can follow along as I'm talking. But I just wanted to give you a preview of your own exploration. And the first section, the table of contents kind of gives you an outline of what's in it. And you'll see that in the guide, there are different sections. There are sections on choosing books carefully, planning interactive read alouds, planning vocabulary lessons, and then a section on homeschool activity guides. So that's sort of a broad strokes outline of what's in there. And the first section focuses on really the importance of choosing great books that are also culturally affirming for children, and not just culturally affirming, but also identity affirming in all of its manifestations. So we intentionally look for books that are going to affirm, for example, children from LGBTQ families, books that affirm children who have an experience with immigrant background. We really want to make sure our children are seeing themselves reflected in the books that are being read aloud, and that they also are experiencing all types of people through these books. So you'll see that on these pages 1 through 4, there's some guiding questions. We kind of think about this as success criteria. So you'll have questions about how responsive are the books? How rich is the language? Take a look at your own children. What kind, do you have books that are actually responsive to them? And so we love this starting with this first part, because it's really telling when you take a look at your own classroom or school or community library, how responsive your books are to the students or the children that you're serving. And we encourage that active analysis of the materials that you're using. So the next section in the planning guide is we give you some really practical tips for planning interactive read alouds. We know from research that repeated interactive read alouds are using complex texts that are language rich and culturally affirming and idea rich are really powerful tools, really powerful activities for building children's literacy. So once you have that beautiful book that we just talked about, you'll want to plan some questions to ask children as you're reading aloud. And so you'll see you'll find on these pages that there are some different levels of questions that we want to ask children while we're reading, not just sort of on the surface, who are the main characters, where are they, but also sort of questions that go below the surface and help children develop inference making skills, which is a really important part of reading as they progress through the grades. And the examples you'll see in the planning guide are really centered on this wonderful book called Last Stop on Market Street by Matt de la Pena and illustrated by Christian Robinson. Yes, windows and mirrors. Yes, thank you for windows, mirrors, and sliding doors. Thank you for adding that, Mary. Okay, so you've got those questions, you've selected your books, you've got those great questions that you've planned. How do you put all this together? So the planning guide gives you a 5-day sequence for repeated interactive read alouds, which really what it does is it helps you to guide children through deeply understanding a book, a wonderful book, developing language that's in the book, and then being mentored into being able to write a similar type of story. So really the book is a mentor text for all sorts of things: reading comprehension, listening comprehension, oral language development, vocabulary development, and writing. So this 5-day sequence offers you some ideas. And one of the party favors I mentioned earlier is an infographic that gives you even more information on this 5-day sequence. So be sure to stay till later and I will provide you with the link. So you will also find in the planning guide some really practical things like sticky note templates. So these templates, you can actually just copy these, stick some sticky notes on them, run them through the copier, and then you'll have the questions to stick in your book sort of as your lesson plan as you're reading, because as we all know, I was a classroom teacher, we all know that when we're trying to read a book to children, it's hard to fumble around with the lesson plan. So this is a way to kind of make that a little more practical. So the planning guide has that in it. And also, vocabulary development is a really big part of the planning guide. We know that vocabulary development is such a rich area of development with young children. There's so much that can be done in meaningful ways. So the books themselves offer exposure to amazing words and phrases and beautiful language. And that in itself is fantastic. And we offer a routine for teaching some of the words explicitly so that children get a little more practice and comfort in using those words, both orally and potentially in writing. So you'll find a template, a routine, and there's also a sample lesson. And then there's also some sticky notes for vocabulary you might want to point out. Also in the planning guide, and Stephen is going to talk more about this, are some homeschool activity guides. And these are provided currently in English and Spanish, and we're hoping to provide additional languages as we proceed with this project. But these can actually be used in the classroom, and they can also be used at home with families. So they're multi-purpose. And as I mentioned, Stephen's going to be talking about them more, but on the front side, you'll find a brief synopsis of the book. So I mentioned Last Stop on Market Street, some very basic ideas for kinds of questions parents and families might want to ask. And then on the back side, some creative expression, mindfulness, kindness, those types of activities that can be done at school and at home. Okay. So now I know that might feel like drinking from a fire hose, but I did just want to walk you through some of the things that are available in the planning guide to sort of as a commercial and advertisement to get you to go into it. It's free and you can adapt it. But now I'm going to pass the planning. Kim's reminding me the planning guide. There is also a planning guide tutorial available. So if you didn't catch everything I said, you can see me talking about the planning guide, talking about all these things again in a tutorial video in the link that Kim just posted. So now I'm going to pass the baton over to Julie Montali, who is going to talk about how SCOE is implementing the planning guide.
Thank you, Pam. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. It's really my pleasure to share more about joyful literacy from the big picture to a bit about our local context as an example, and we're just getting started. So let me share with you just first of all, kind of zooming out. So you've had a bit of an overview now about joyful literacy, what it's about, the curriculum and the approach. I want to zoom out just a little bit more and talk about sort of this concept of repeated interactive read-alouds for children with these really beautiful culturally affirming texts, and show you kind of the level of impact we can, and I think we really will make. Here are 3 big ideas for you. And you're going to see that these ideas really, they sort of overlap and integrate. The first one is for really joyful literacy to take hold, it's got to be systemic and sustainable. So we really want to engage multiple audiences, from early learning and care providers, classroom teachers and other educators, expanded learning staff, site leaders, district leaders, early learning and curriculum directors, our librarians, just really everybody who is involved in literacy efforts, and of course our parents and families. And I'm going to save that for Stephen to talk just a little bit about. Secondly, we think it's really important that something like joyful literacy be actionable and implementable, right? So there's your SAT word for the day. But we want it to be something that can happen in a variety of settings and connected to so many important initiatives that are happening. Sarah gave us a tidbit on all the great things that are happening across California and how these really connect with each other. We are about supporting young learners. We want them to be successful through school and beyond. And then thirdly, we strive to build this educative and sort of accessible book kits and approaches to literacy. It's really about building a true learning community around early literacy, so that adults that are supporting our youngest scholars with these incredible books, that everyone can see themselves, and they also get a chance to learn a little bit about somebody who looks different or is different or has different experiences. So it's really good for everybody. We think that having these approaches to develop reading skills and knowledge that happen in the classroom are also things that we really want to engage others in after-school programs, in homes, really all those different contexts that our little ones are part of. So we're excited that this really crosses so many different places and people. So in Sacramento, you can see that we have been sort of doing a soft launch in the last year, working with a whole host of different folks. And it's been really fun to sort of have these different groups working on this united sort of message. We're getting really great feedback that this is an exciting change of practice for some folks. Some people are, sort of learning a little bit of a new practice in terms of moving from sort of what we might call old school read alouds, where everybody's quiet and we just read it from cover to cover, to this really and joyful is the right word, this really joyful, active, engaged way of digging into text together and across early learners all the way through, at least into those early grades. And as Pam mentioned, it's even taking off and with the older kiddos. So here's kind of some of the groups that we've been working on. It's been just amazing to have a mixed group together. And we've done certain series with just expanded learning staff, and we're really looking forward to time that we're partnering with our libraries. So, let me go back there. So connecting to some of these really important initiatives, I can tell you that right here in Sacramento, we have a big initiative called Sacramento County Reads that we're very excited about. But it also connects to work that we're doing statewide and helping to push forward. So you might be familiar with the this document here that's in the middle of the slide, Creating Equitable Environments for Young Boys of Color. The subheading of that is Disrupting Disproportionate Outcomes. This, I would say, if you haven't seen this, it's an absolute must check out. It's an incredible document. We see joyful literacy as an application of this. It's really, taking those recommendations and putting it into this very active, engaging, and evidence-based pedagogy that, like, for instance, I can tell you that recently we were with one district and focused on one of the books that we have already in the book kits, I Am Every Good Thing. And it's just really a great way to exemplify how to bring theory into practice. And then the third bullet here, you may be very familiar with the Inclusive Early Education Expansion Program. Has many connections to the tenets of joyful literacy. We're excited by this approach. It's one that's undergirded by universal design for learning, and it's really centering on a philosophy of including all. So we love that. We hope you do too. Lastly, we've got our Joyful Literacy Makes Joyful Families. So here are some photos from work that we've done. You're just about to meet Stephen, who's in the prominent picture there, reading alongside families and kiddos, and really making this into a place where they can also do their creative expression. It's really just been an absolute joy to see that happening with not only our formal educators, but our children's first teachers, their parents and families. I love being able to talk with people about joyful literacy. And so I've collected some quotes, and here are two that we think just really speak to what we're at the core all about. Athena McQuarrie is an expanded learning project specialist who has been really digging into joyful literacy here in Sacramento and supporting that work. She says, joyful literacy is a simple model for expanded learning practitioners that address complex text with early learners. The tools and activity protocols align with the 5 principles of learning in after school and summer. And in that joyful literacy creates an environment where learning is active, collaborative, meaningful, supports mastery, and expands horizons. So thank you, Athena, for that wonderful reflection. And then recently we had a parent who was also, he was from Afghanistan. He was also a teacher in his native country. And he said, in our country, we use the old way of reading. I like this new way of interacting with children. We would be happy if this program continues. And so that was really a wonderful piece of feedback, right from our own parents here. Now, exciting, we have an institute that we're right now planning for wholeheartedly. We will be bringing teams from Sacramento County all around the county. We'll have teachers and site and district leaders, librarians, expanded learning staff, and family engagement coordinators who are really digging in as well to help support their families. So that is a really exciting thing that we're looking forward to. We've so far been able to produce like 1 day or small series. And so this will be our big first 3-day institute. And those of you who are not right here with us, stay tuned, because over the next 3 years, we will be engaging county offices of education and districts across the state offering institutes. And we're really very excited about including this in our upcoming statewide inclusive early learning work. And so that will be launching in 2024-25. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be turning this over to Stephen to tell you just a little bit more. We are so determined to get joyful literacy into the hands, hearts, and minds of not only all educators, but our children's first teachers and their parents and families. And so I'm going to turn that over to Stephen so he can tell you just a little bit more about that group of very interested folks. So hello, Stephen, and it's all yours.
Hi, great. Thanks so much, Julie. Yes, and as a former preschool teacher, I know, like many of you, that children are only in schools or in their early learning programs for part of the time. And it's really important to build strong, meaningful family relationships. These are some pictures from some of our sessions with families and also with educators. Joyful literacy strategies and the creative expression activities that Pamela talked about earlier, and I'm going to talk about a little bit, happen in the classroom, but they can also be brought home to engage with families. And for each of the books in the practice guide, there is a homeschool activity card that highlights creative writing and visual and digital activities and mindfulness and lots of different activities to do with playful learning that families can actually do with their kids at home. And that there are some pictures, here are some pictures of the educators engaged in some of those activities. As I said, during the family professional learning activities with educators, but also with some of the families. And this is the homeschool program connection with a book called I Like Myself. And this is one that we love to work with families because it really speaks to them. It's easy to understand for the young kids, and the parents can really build off of it as well. I Like Myself. And it's similar to the family activity that Pamela shared earlier on last stop on Market Street, with one side being a summary of the story and some starter questions that a parent or guardian might ask their children before they read the story, while they're reading the story, and then even after they read the story. And on the back are the creative expression activities related to the story, such as for this one, talking to children and families about what they like about themselves, or having the children draw about it, what they like about themselves, or even the family members too, moving to music and dancing around while calling out the different things a child likes about themselves, or even telling others in the family what they like about themselves and building those relationships. These are also activities that the educators can do in the classroom or the early learning programs, and parents and guardians can do at home with their children, making connections between the learning that happens at school or in the early learning program, and also the learning that happens at home. So I'm just going to walk through very quickly some of these activities so that you can see how this family home interaction with the school and the early learning program work. So in our Joyful Literacy family sessions, we also discuss these strategies as well to engage children with the story by interacting through questions before even reading the story, and while reading the story, and then after reading the story. And these are starter questions to engage the children, but families will come to ask their own questions as well as they relate to their child. This honors their own capacity, the family's own capacity as storytellers. Notice the questions when you see them are open-ended, not just yes or no questions or a quick right answer. The questions promote critical thinking, imagination, and help to build literacy capacity for the child themselves. So before reading, adults can engage with the children right away by asking questions to get the children curious and excited and wondering about what they're going to read. Parents can ask these and other questions each time they pick up a book, because repetition is really good. They can continually ask these questions. So this story we're going to read is I Like Myself. Parents can show the cover And they can talk about the title, they could talk about the author, they could talk about the illustrator. A lot of stories are told not just through the text, but also through the beautiful illustrations. Let's have you play along with us, and you can respond in the chat to any of these questions I ask. All right? So take a look at the cover. What do you notice about the cover? What do you think about when you hear the title, I Like Myself? And what do you think about that you might discover as we read this book together? Go ahead and put something in the chat. Great, I'm seeing a lot of wonderful comments. Pride, looking happy. She looks so happy, dancing, bright. Excellent. And this is what the kids will do when you're engaging with them and when the parents are engaging with them at home. They'll actually be interacting with the story instead of just having it be one-sided. Now, while you're reading the story, you might ask additional questions, and these are what we guide the parents to do. And of course, they can ask other questions too, but we want to get them started. What do you notice in the picture? What do you think about what we just read? What are you curious about? These are just a few examples. Now I'm going to go forward and read a little bit of the story, and then I might ask some questions, and you can continue to put those in the chat. I like myself. I'm glad I'm me. There's no one else I'd rather be. Now take a look at that picture. This picture, like all the books that we use, are beautifully illustrated. Stories can be told a lot through the illustrations that the authors and the illustrators use. And we want to build visual literacy for young children as well. So we really draw their attention to the pictures. Take a look at this picture. What do you notice in the picture? Look very closely. Go ahead and put it in the chat. What do you notice about this picture? What questions does it bring up? What do you wonder about? Great. Great wonderings in these chats. I love it. This is exactly what the children will be doing. I like my eyes, my ears, my nose. I like my fingers and my toes. Now here a parent might volunteer what they like about their own body, maybe their eyes, maybe their hair, and then they can ask the children what they like about their body. Some questions are going to be text-based, but some will go beyond the text, like, what are you curious about now? What are you curious about now? Put that in the text. What are you curious about? Great, wonderful. Oh, I love these comments people are writing in there. It's so exciting to see what the children will come up with when you ask them questions during the reading. And then after the reading, the story is over. But parents and guardians can continue to engage with their children with additional interactive discussions about the story, like, what did you think about the book? How did this make you feel? What was your favorite part? What do you think the author wanted us to learn from the story? Now, that last question is a really deep comprehension text-based inquiry question. But you know what? Our children have the capacity to engage in these types of questions. Engage the children and the families in our family sessions with Joyful Literacy. We ask them to think about the story they just read, and we have these paper crowns, and we ask them to write about themselves and what they like about themselves. But we ask the parents to do the same thing. And we find this very, very empowering for the parents and the guardians to do it. It's so amazing to see the parents articulate their strengths as a parent. In our professional development sessions, we ask the educators to identify their literacy strengths to promote an asset-based orientation. What we are doing in Joyful Literacy builds upon what teachers can and have been doing and draws on their own superpowers as educators. Then everyone dances around with their crown. Here's mine. I'm going to put mine on right now. There's my crown. I wish I could send you all each of your own crown to decorate. And then they can dance around and they get to know each other and they introduce themselves. And it's just so joyful. Now I'm going to pass it back to Pam, but I might just keep dancing. Pam?
Thank you. Oh, nice. Yes, we do dance. We dance in all of our engagement activities with adults, with educators, with families. And it's joyful. It's a really fun way to learn, not just for children, but for adults too. Adults need to have fun too. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Julie. So as promised, I am going to let you know what we're up to next and also give you some party favors, which we hope will support you in your joyful literacy efforts wherever you are. So first of all, we'd love for you to think about so far, what is one thing that you think you're going to do as a result of today's session with us? It could just be, I'm going to read the planning guide, or it could be, I'm going to go, somebody mentioned a family literacy night. Maybe you want to use the homeschool activity guides at the family literacy night. But if you could just kind of share with us, I'll give you 10 seconds to share. It doesn't have to be extensive, just really quick, jot down. What are you thinking about? We'd love to know. Be joyful in my reading. I love that. Yes, you have permission. You have our blessing to be joyful in your read alouds and in all literacy activities with children, because that's really important for you and the children. Going to the library and getting good books. Yes, it's going too fast for me to read them all, but these are wonderful, wonderful ideas. Thank you for sharing these with me, with us, and with all of you. Yes, please feel free to keep sharing those. We will just devour them after the webinar, and it's going to make us feel so good to know that this has been useful to you. So this is the, but wait, there's more moment. So we've got the planning guide. You saw the foundational skills paper. That's a resource. You've seen that there's a planning guide tutorial video. The homeschool activity guide, there's lots of material. So what we're doing now in partnership between the REL West and Sacramento County Office of Education is we are creating a big joyful literacy playbook. And this is going to be free for everybody across the nation. And it's going to include a lot of things. It's going to include teacher material. So we're creating book kits that have actual lessons in them. So the planning guide gives you ideas to plan your own lessons and some sample lessons, but the book kits are actually going to be a week-long sequence and series of actual lessons for the interactive read alouds, the vocabulary development, the creative expression activities, and of course the homeschool activity guides. And of course they each feature a culturally / identity affirming book. And then the playbook is also going to include teacher guidance. So it's not just going to be, hey, here are your materials, but there will be guidance so that the foundations of this work is well understood and you have guidance. You're not just on your own. It's also going to include professional learning materials for local implementation. So if you are an instructional coach or if you're a professional learning provider, maybe you work at a county office, maybe you're in pre-service teacher education, you'll have materials to actually provide learning experiences to adults. so that they can strengthen their skills in joyful literacy practices. And then, of course, there's going to be family literacy engagement materials that go beyond the homeschool activity guides. We're creating some family literacy and arts nights, kind of kits, so that, and when I say kits, it's going to be activities mostly that you can download and make your own, so that you can really kind of go further in this family school partnership joyful literacy endeavor. And there's also going to be administrator materials and center director materials, and which are also will also be useful to instructional coaches, teacher leaders, etc. Because we know that there needs to be support for this type of teaching and learning to happen. So those materials will be available too. You won't be left hanging if you're somebody who leads and supports teachers. So that's coming. We're in development right now, so it'll be a little while, but we're going to try to actually release materials as we go. So, keep checking back with us, and we're going to keep pushing out materials as we go. For now, the hot off the presses party favors that I mentioned earlier are two resources, and Kim is putting the link in the chat right now. The first resource is an infographic on the teaching and learning cycle. So that 5-day sequence that I talked about earlier, that's in the planning guide, with dialogic reading, repeated interactive read alouds, vocabulary development, writing, creative expression. That's actually a process called the teaching and learning cycle. And it's not just random activities. They're connected and they build on each other throughout the week. So this infographic kind of explains how that works. And then the second resource is a part of the book, part of our first book kit. It's actually the 5-day interactive read aloud sequence, the TLC sequence that goes from introducing the book, through getting deeper into the book, through talking about the book's life lessons, to having children orally retell the story, to having children either create or write, whether that writing is squiggles, emergent writing, drawing, whatever that is, to actually, by the time you get to first grade, children can actually retell the story in writing pretty well after a week of talking about it and retelling it. So that's a series of lessons there. And there's also, I think in this particular handout, there might be some sample success criteria to be shared with children, and a sample, I believe there's a sample way of kind of observing what children are doing with their language and literacy. I have to look at it because it's part of the book kit. So that's being provided. So hopefully you stayed and you'll have these materials in hand. As I mentioned earlier, check back often. We have two resources right here. One is our West Ed Joyful Literacy with Young Children page, which has a lot of those materials kind of in the same place. So you have the planning guide, you have the foundational skills paper, and you have the tutorial video there. And then when you scroll down, there's actually lots of other resources. And then on the right-hand side, there's a blog post that we all did together, Kim, Stephen, Julie, and I, talking about this work. And we're pretty much still at the beginning, which is really exciting. So we're not finished. We don't have everything tied up in a bow yet. So it's just kind of an example about how we're working our way together through this journey. And we hope that it can help inform you in your journey. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, we do prioritize very intentionally love and joy. We think that is the foundation of all learning, and we hope that you will find ways to have more love and joy in your lives, whether it's in the classroom, outside the classroom, certainly with young children. And I love this quote by Robert Louis Stevenson, which is, "Find out where joy resides. Look for it. Look under rocks. Where can you find little instances of joy, and give it a voice far beyond singing? For to miss the joy is to miss all." So I want to thank you on behalf of our panel and our esteemed guest, Sarah. And I'm going to hand things over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I think you all felt the enthusiasm and passion that all of our panelists have for this topic and making sure that our little ones feel a love of learning and a love of literacy. So thank you all for sharing with us. Just as a reminder, we would really appreciate your feedback. So if you can please take the quick survey, the QR code is on your screen right now. If you can log on and take a very quick survey, it should take you less than about 3 minutes. We would really appreciate it. And then also as a reminder, we will have an email coming to your inbox this afternoon, right after this webinar concludes, that has all of the presentation slides that you saw earlier, as well as all of the links and everything that's been in the chat. For those that are interested in any certificate of attendance for professional learning hours or anything like that, please reach out to us at REL West. Our email is on your screen. Please reach out. We're happy to provide that for you. And again, we just really thank you for spending this hour with us. And if there's anything else that we can do to help you in your classroom practice, and again, sharing the love of literacy with little ones, please let us know. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening.